Shalom Aleichem. Today is Wednesday. It's Tes Nissen. Maimer Hayadua. Nicht vergessen sagen dem Nessi. Nicht vergessen sagen dem Nessi. Nicht vergessen wegen dem Nessi. And we're doing the third shir on the Kapital, Kuf Chav Gimel of the Rebbe's. For Yidalf Nissen Abba Lein will call Yisrael Teva. Amen, amen, amen. Netzach Salavod. Now, first of all, today is the birthday of my nephews, my twin nephews who were born Tes Nissen. I guess Tufshin Mem Vov, if I'm not mistaken. So Yisrael Noach Ben Risha and Dave Ber Ben Risha. I think Dave Ber is a little older. They had a Pesach Bris. And so seien gesund und stark. Matzliach sein in der Avodas HaKodesh, mit welcher sie vernehmen sich, b'chol makom shehem. Ois für in der Kavan Hoyena. Sicher sein sie des Gals Melech HaMashiach. Hab nachher von sehr eigenen Kindern sein gesund, gesund, gesund und noch einmal gesund. Begash mir so beruch nis. Hem Beisam und Bnei Bnei's Beisam, Riches Yom Shalom Tevis. Also the share of course is a schus for the four Shleime Meir Chaim Ben Chai Yetzirah. But Teva Nira Vanigel Amatam Asaret Tvochem. Now, Rabbi said this is our third shir on the Maimer, on this Perek, I'm sorry. And what I'm doing in this third shir is explaining the Perek based on a foundational idea. Just like in the last class, I based the Perek on a foundational idea, which is Golus, and Yeridet Tzerech Aliyah. But it gets very bad, but it gets better. This shir is based on a Tzemach Tzedek, which is mitzayin to a Medrash Rabbi in Parashat B'Shalach, that says, Perek Chav Hei, on the pasuk Elecha Nasasi Es Eini Hayeshi Bashamayim. This is Avodas Teshuva. And when the Tzemach Tzedek explains, when a Yid does Teshuva, he goes away from being an Eved and a Shivcha to being a Ben. Keinenu Ela L'Shem Elokeinu Ad Sheyechanenu. Now the first shir I gave in this Maimer was this Perek was very long. I sort of told you all the Mefarshim and sort of the spirit of the Perek. And the Nekuda that I brought out is that Elecha Masasi Es Einai is lower and higher than Es Einai El HaHarim, the word Einayim is used. The concept of Elecha Nasasi Es Einai means that the eyes of a Yid are looking towards Hashem from darkness, from Golus. But on the other hand, they're reaching to Hashem in the Madreg of Eine Pkicha, the Leinim, Alakus, which is above Ishtalshalos, not the way the Eibush comes into Ishtalshalos, as it is in Zman HaBayis, which is represented by Esa Einai El HaHorim, but how Yidden are in touch, use their eyes, and look heavenward longingly and desperately to connect Alakus and the Madrege of above Seder Ishtalshalos, which is awake and is available to the Jewish people, even and especially in the times of Golus. And that's what this shir is going to be about, how Yidden in Zman HaGolus are doing the Avodas of Teshuva, and the Yisrein, the advantages that come at the Avodas of Teshuva. So let me share a few things about Teshuva as we set out on this Perek. Number one, an idea which is very important to me, because of my business, because I had the great schos of learning and teaching the Mamarim of the Rebbe, our Rebbe. So the Rebbe has so much on Teshuva. The Rebbe has so much on Teshuva. Beginning, of course, with the quote from the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of the Maimer of Matevu, in the Kutatei in Bolok, where the Alter Rebbe brings the question which he asks over and over and over again is, Maimarim, what is the reason for the neshama coming into this world? And he says there's many answers to the question. And he concludes with the following words, V'atiret ha'amiti, the real answer for why the neshama comes into the guf is because of Ma'al Teshuva, the idea of Teshuva. And in the Rebbe's Maimarim, there's 101 discussions on the Inyan HaTeshuva, and the Mailas HaTeshuva, and the Kavanas HaTeshuva, and the Atzlachas HaTeshuva, v'chuli, v'chuli. And one of the more interesting ideas that the Rebbe brings is that he brings the Maimer Chazal, B'mi nimlach b'nishmeseim tel tzadikim, when the Eibishter created the world, with whom did he consult on the creation, b'nishmeseim tel tzadikim? So there's many instances, many circumstances in the Rebbe's Torah where he would follow that statement up with the statement of Yameh Kulam Tzadikim, that every Yid is called Tzadik. But in these Maimorim, the Rebbe goes in a different direction. When the Eibush made hamlocha for creation, the anticipation, the plan, so to speak, was that all Yidden can be in Madregas Tzadikim, which means the Beis Midrash would not be destroyed, and Yidden would not go into Golus, and they wouldn't have the idea as Yisrael v'Seiv Galus and Eis and Teshuva, and only then Meyadein Golin. Like it says in Rambam Perek Zayin of Hilchos Teshuva, which we learned mamish a few days ago. And therefore the Rebbe explains this by Morim, but mean Nimelach Meshvasem Shal Tzadikim. When the Eibush created the world, the way it was designed was based on the vision of us being Tzadikim and serving Him in a Tzadik's world. And the whole need for Teshuva, and the whole avodah of Teshuva, and the whole schar of Teshuva, not only schar that we get Kvayachol, but schar that the Eibush gets is called Chiddush, a nayas, a novelty. As if Kvayachol is not part of the Eibush's plan. Of course, you cannot say that, that's foolish to say that the Eibush didn't have this in his plan. But the way the Eibush created the world, the design of the creation reflects a presumption of b'minim lach b'nishmeseim shel tzadikim. And when Yidden do tshuva, they're Kvayachol adding something, a chiddush b'maisa b'reishis, as if it's beyond how the Eibush designed creation. And that's how we understand Malas HaTshuva. So when you have a Kapital Tilim that's understood to mean the process of tshuva, that very idea and that very process is so special to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it's Kvayachol, what we are giving back to the Eibush, like it says in some Chazals, like Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, we're becoming Shutfim HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'maisa b'reishis. The Eibush created a world with the possibility for us to be tzaddikim, and because of circumstances, and so forth and so on, it became necessary and it became possible for the Avodas HaTshuva. Along with that necessity and along with that possibility came that schus, that incredible opportunity and that incredible additional madrega of Gili, which was Avodas HaTzadikim, which is higher than all other inyanim. Like the Gemara says, "B'makom shebal tshuva eimdim tzadikim gemurim einam eimdim sham," and the Rambam adds the famous word, "B'makom shebal tshuva eimdim ein tzadikim gemurim yechelam la'amid sham yom chelam la'amid sham." Tzadik can't possibly stand in the madrega of tzadik. In the Gemara there's a machlekes, but this is the halacha that a Baal Tshuva is higher than a tzaddik, and certainly according to the Zeh, which is quoted in the Igeres HaTshuva, in the Lashon HaZeh, the Mashchen le'bechele yata, the Baal Tshuva is higher than a tzaddik because he draws with an extra power because of the initial distance. And that's the Malas HaTshuva. And like it says in Tanya Perek Zayin in the Kutei Amorim, that when a person does tshuva, Zainus Naslik is Achis, it's not only that the Zainus on his battle Lagamri, like the Rebbe has the Sikha where he explains 3 madregas in tshuva. Zainus Naslik is Goges, that the Zainus on his battle Lagamri, which is the Baal Tshuva becoming a tzaddik, and then Zainus Naslik is Achis, which is even higher than madregas tzaddik. And the reason when a Baal Tshuva does tshuva is higher than madregas tzaddik because the Aveda itself brings him to the tshuva, like the Rebbe explains in that Sikha with the great Oimek, the idea of Hechsher Mitzvah, the ultimate Hechsher Mitzvah, is the Aveda which is setting up the tshuva and the schar of the tshuva itself. And this makes the Avodas HaTshuva and the Elokus which a Baal Tshuva brings into the world much higher than the Avodas HaTshuva and the Elokus which is brought into the world through Avodas HaTzadikim. And that's what this Perek is about, according to this Shir, which is based on the Medrash Rabin B'Shalach, which is quoted by the Tzemach Tzedek on this Kapital. Now, I want to say something which is a personal correlation. In other words, I don't make up things. I'm not smart enough to make up things, but I do make medam and milsel, I do make corollaries. And in these shurim in the Kapital, including the shurim I gave yesterday, the first shir and the second shir, a lot of the ideas that I said, although are written in Sfarim, the connections to the Perek and connections to the Psukim, are b'derech hefsher, laniyas daita, their own personal interpretations. And there's another idea which is brought in the Chassidus in a lot of places, which I think is very apropos when you start off a conversation about the idea of tshuva. And this Kapital, which is a Kapital of Elecha Nasasi Es Einei HaYeshu B'Shamayim, that you have in Chassidus, Maimorim, that explains the difference in a dal and an oni. A dal means a poor person, and an oni means a poor person. You have this also of Maimorim Abasi Lagani. And of course you also have the word Evyin. And the Maimorim explore what is the difference between a dal and an Evyin. And the Maimorim bring out something which, besides for the avodah significance of it, has an incredibly profound psychological idea, dimension, aspect. And that is what happens to people when they're very poor. What happens to people when they suffer a lot, when their lives are very challenged. So we all know that when people's lives are easy and comfortable, they have newness, yoyness, they have difficulties. We all wish we had those problems, but it comes along with the test of wealth, with the test of comfort. In the language of our Perek, halaga sha'ananim, the mockery that we get from people who are sitting on the hog and not working particularly hard, who mock a Yidden Golas. The challenges of the avodah of an Oshir, the challenges of somebody who has plenty, whose life is good, is that it's very difficult to maintain a sense of purpose and usefulness and work as a principle. But it's a comfortable life. A poor person struggles terribly just to survive, and the reactions of poor people are polar or extreme. Some poor people, because of their poverty, they become like animals. They lose their dignity completely. They lose their shame, they lose their self-respect, they lose any sense of being human, and they just, in order to survive, will do anything. That's a dal. Other people, because of their poverty, because of their shame, it purges them, it refines them. And what they lack of in material wealth, and maybe material standing in a community or in a culture, they more than make up for in their becoming refined human beings. They have their honor, they have their dignity, they have their shame, they have their principle, they have their righteousness. And that's an ani. Both poor, both equally poor. But one, because of the poverty, loses his soul and he becomes impoverished, not just materially but spiritually. And the other, because of his poverty, becomes enriched. And that's the understanding of the Baal Teshuva in this Perek. That before the Baal Teshuva does Teshuva is a dal, that because of his poverty, because of Golus, he loses his shame. Rav Sovainu Vuz, Rabba Sovala Nafshenu Alaga Sha'ananim Abuz Legeyenim. There's a three different concepts of shame, which we'll touch on. But there's a person who loses his shame completely, doesn't care. The Teshuva process of a Yidden Golus doesn't make him rich. The Teshuva process of a Yidden Golus makes him poor, still, but with honor, if you will, with a dignity, with a purity and a holiness and a self-purging, or a conditional purging that makes him incredibly pure, incredibly beautiful, on a very, very, very high level. And that's the consequence of the person doing Teshuva, that they go from a state of not caring about shame to being so transformed and so refined by the shame itself that they become incredibly rich under those conditions of shame. And if you think about it, this is consistent with how I established our understanding of this Perek from the very beginning. That on the one hand, Golus is a lower condition. And on the other hand, it's not only that Golus brings to Geula, but Golus brings to Dichalein, to a condition which is far higher than Geula. The idea of Mashiach also, that Mashiach makes Bali Teshuva out of tzaddikim, that even a tzaddik, in all of his wealth, in all of his sha'ananim, instead of abuz, lag, instead of sha'ananim, there is there is the tefillah l'onichiyatev l'fnei Hashem yishpech sicha, which I talked about in an earlier class also, that it says in the Zohar that tefillah l'oni goes on Mashiach. Even though nobody is richer than Mashiach, still he defines himself as an ani. Now, why would the richest person of all define himself as an ani? And the answer is because he never is distracted by what we call in the culture of Chassidus Giluyim. He's never distracted by the richness of life and of opportunities in the world, and he's always focused on Dichalein v'imchalein chafasti, and the Eibishter himself. And when it comes to the Eibishter, Hakol kipsoyim etzle yizbarach, we're all fools. We're all impoverished. But that poverty is higher than wealth. That poverty is the poverty associated with Mashiach Tzidkenu, who's not Nespal from the Giluyim, from the furniture, from what's around the Melech. He's interested only in the Melech Alein, Dich Alein, Anon, Nesiv, Malk. And that's the other side of Teshuva. And that's the true meaning of Yidden Tzedek Aliyah. Mashiach's coming doesn't mean that the world goes back to a condition how it was in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, although that's true also. Mashiach's coming means that the world experiences the godliness of the Baal Teshuva, which means the world is filled with godliness, and the Baal Teshuva is never distracted by the secondary aspects, even the aspects which are connected to Malachim and to Sfiris. He wants dich and dich allein, anon nesiv malka. Like it's explained at length, tak in the Maimer of Yud Aleph Nissen, b'yem ashta yasayel tafshin lamed, b'yem ashta yasayim tafshin lamed aleph. And that's the advantage of tshuva. And it explains how the Kapital starts, Shir HaMalas. So first of all, I explained to you already in the previous class that Shir HaMalas goes to Chochmah and Bina. And Bina is called tshuva. Because Shir HaMalas is 15, Yud K goes on the Hanastaros Lavaya Lekenu, what they discussed in the previous class, and I'm not going to repeat it here. But Shir HaMalas is a positive thing. Shir HaMalas is the concept of simcha. And you scratch your head and you wonder, Wie kommt Abal Tshuva Simcha? Abal Tshuva is a leiv nishba v'nitke. He's a broken-hearted person. What's the joy of the Abal Tshuva? And of course the answer is two things. Number one, as the Rebbe says, Tshuva is a mitzvah, and a mitzvah has to be done with simcha. Even the Tshuva process itself has to be done with simcha. And there's no doubt that the Rebbe's turned the page on this. The Rebbe was machadash a new derech and avodah. That even Tshuva, which is traditionally done with meridus, zivche lekim ruach nishbaru leiv nishba v'nitke lekim leisivzeh. And the Rebbe says the Tshuva is b'dam terech simcha. Derech agav, I have a story which I've told many times, that my Rabbi Reuben, Zohar Malichting Ganed Zechreini Levracha, Rav Chaim Reuben, Chaim Shalom Reuben, Rav Chaim Reuben, who was the Rav of the Beis David Gershon Shul, there across from the police station. So he told me that when his father passed away, his father was a Goheben Nerid. I don't know if his father was a Madregas Tzaddik, but his father was what the Rebbe called a Hasidic Shir from the earlier generations. He was a Rebbe, he was a good Nerid, he was the Dolan Rebbe, the Dalina Rebbe. He was Adam Gadol B'Yeser. He was very close to the Moshe Feinstein, and there was an enormous amount of mutual respect. And when he passed away, the Rebbe sent a message of Nicham Avelim through David Raskin, who was his tenant, Olav Shalom, at the time. And the message was that any time a Yid is doing a mitzvah, you have to do it with simcha. And sitting Shiva Avelis is also a mitzvah, so Mela has to be done with simcha. What is the mitzvah of Shiva? What is the mitzvah of Avelis? And the answer is the mitzvah of Shiva, the mitzvah of Avelis is Teshuva. Now the Rebbe didn't explain, but we know it from the Sichas, the V'achayit in a Libe, that Vistach Ne'edar, Echad Medneach Abura. So Kol Achabura Kula, when one person is missing from a group, the whole group has to be made, as they say in Yiddish, a tap done in pekel, take examination of self, do tshuva. And if you're doing tshuva, mitech simcha. So that's the first idea, that tshuva is done mitech simcha. This is a chiddush, I suppose you could say, of our generation. Then of course there's the idea of tshuva law, which even in the Tanya, it's a tshuva of not going away from Ra, it's a tshuva of coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's certainly done mitech simcha, that the tshuva is the tshuva of tefillah and Torah, not the tshuva of correcting chatoim. So that's certainly done mitech simcha. And lastly, v'gam zeh ikeh, the idea of b'chol otzev yiyeh meiser, that when a person does tshuva, even if he does tshuva with atzvos, what Alter Rebbe calls the Tanya otzev amiti, after the tshuva there's simcha. And if you study the Tanya carefully, you'll see that the whole justification for the tshuva, the whole allowance for the tshuva, is the simcha amitis abo acher tshuva amitis by the shem elakav atzav amiti b'avaya elakav, the simcha which follows. And this is the joy of the Baal Tshuva, like it says in Rambam in Perek Zayin of Hilchas Tshuva, that a minute before he was so far away and he was so on and so forth, and now he's a Yedid and he's a Karev, he's a Nechmad, all the Lashonos that the Rambam uses to describe the transformation that happens to a person when he transforms from before the Tshuva to after the Tshuva. And there's an incredible amount of simcha in the life of that Baal Tshuva, in the process of Tshuva itself. And Tshuva dafin tamtech simcha is the avoida. And the simcha achar ha'atzev, which comes after the tshuva, is the joy of the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the joy that yesterday he was dotting toichem beveis hasurim achar ha'rechayim, and now he's chayzer lebeis aviv hamelach. There's an enormous amount of simcha, and that like Tanya Perek Lamed Aleph. And that's the shir ha'malis of tshuva. It's the joy associated with doing tshuva, and the joy that happens as a result of the tshuva that a person is able to do. And now we're getting into the Perek itself. Shir HaMalos, this is a song of great upliftedness. The upliftedness is the result of the tshuva, and the upliftedness is the tshuva itself. And the upliftedness motivates the tshuva. And what is this song? I turn to the Eibishter. I turn my eyes to you, to Dich Alein, to the Eibishter, not the name of Hashem, not Elokim, not any other name, but Elecha, to Hashem himself. And on the one hand, this means I'm turning to the Eibishter, because I don't know even how to say his name. I don't even know how to address him because I'm so far away. On the other hand, I'm crying out to him like a little child which is out to his father, with the great simplicity, and in that simplicity he's touching Atzmas Amhus, like I mentioned in the previous class, that's brought in the Maimorim, Abbasir Legani, where the Rebbe interprets the story that the Baal Shem Tov, he's asked people, was macht men? And the only reason he asked them the question, because he wanted them to say, Geleit Hashem Yisbarach, Gebenz and the Heilige Bashefa, they spoke Dafke in Yiddish, and the Rebbe explained that their speaking in Yiddish and thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu was a concept of Dich Alein, reaching out to the Eibishter himself. Atzmus Amhus Mamish. And that's the Elecha. A person raises his eyes to the Eibishter himself from great distance, on the one hand, and from a sense of I'm always close to the Eibishter because we're bonim atam avayilkechem on the other hand. That's the Elecha Sasei Eseinai. And then we mention Hayeshvi Bashamayim. Now there's a number of ways of translating Hayeshvi Bashamayim in the scheme of Teshuva. And one of them is that he's Bashamayim and not Ba'oretz. Right? One of the greatest foundations of Achdas Hashem is Hamagbihi Lo Shoves Hameshpili Lereis Bashmayim Ba'oretz. The Goy says, Romal Kol Goyim Adeshem Ala Shamayim Kavod. The Goyim say the Eibush is in Shamayim and not on Oretz. And we say the Eibush is higher than Shemaim and Oretz, Hamashpil Lereis Bashmayim of Oretz. And Hayeshvi Bashamayim doesn't mean Chas V'Shalom that the Eibush is Bashamayim and not Ba'oretz, but it means that the Eibush's Gilui is only Bashamayim. And Ba'oretz is a hell of a hester because of the Yidden that are not correct. That's motivating the person to do Teshuva. Alternatively, you could say that Hayeshvi Bashamayim, that he's not even Bashamayim. Only the Yud, the Pintalet, the Nakud is Yeshvi Bashamayim. Now sometimes that Yud is considered higher than everything that's expanded and developed. And sometimes it's only a Nakuda, like Nakuda Tachsa you say, Yeshvi Bashamayim, but Bashamayim is only a Yud. Because when there's a Maimed Matzav of Golos, when there's a Maimed Matzav of Helen V'Hester. So in terms of Gilu, the Eibush is far away. So we're Lechan Sasri, Es'enai, because the godliness which is coming into the world in a revealed way is Yeshvi Bashamayim, and not Ba'oretz, and even Bashamayim it's only a Yud. So we're calling out to the Eibush, then we're doing Teshuva. And the nature of the Teshuva is as follows, Hine. We know what an Eved and a Shivcha are. An Eved and a Shivcha in this scheme means a Dal. A person, because of his spiritual poverty, because of his lack of self-identity and self-control and self-mastery, has fallen so low that he has no dignity, no respect. And he's the property of his master, and that's how he perceives himself. Ki kasbehu, he sees nothing about himself other than the fact that he's the possession, chayfetz, and ownership of his master, who treats him ki kasbehu in that way. And sometimes, like it says in the Mefarshim, the biggest beatings, the biggest tzaddis he gets from his master or mistress, himself or herself, and yet any avadim yada the name and yad give it because they have nobody else to turn to. Because when you're ever in Odin, when you have no shame, even the person against whom you sinned, you reach out to him for compassion, for mercy, for forgiveness, because you have nobody else to turn to, and you don't have the shame of saying, if I wronged you, how can I ask you to help me? And we say to the Eibush that Cain, Eineinu al Hashem Elokeinu. Just as the Eved and the Shivcha, in their poverty, but the poverty is Legreis, it's a negative poverty, reach out to their master, Tadineim and to Gvirta. So Eineinu al Havai Elokeinu. And there's a spin here. Havai Elokeinu means God, unser God, God who is our personal God, like it's explained in Tanya Perek Mem Zayin, and the relationship the Eibush has with Yidden is K'mei Elokei Avraham. That every Yid says all the time that the Eibush is my personal God. And what chus and what justification, on the what basis does a Yid able to say that the Eibush is my personal God? And of course the answer is that by Avraham Avinu it's through Avodah. He earned the right to say my God, not just to say God, creator of heaven and earth. Hashem Elokei Hashamayim, Hashem Elokei Hashamayim, Elokei Ha'aretz, like he says in Chumash Rashi, in Pashas Chayisora, that he was Margil Shmeishel HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'fi Galei V'Shov, and in doing so he earned the right to say Hashem Elokai, mine God, my personal God. The Jewish people have it B'Yerusha because we're B'nei Avraham, Yitzchak V'Yankiv, Churi Mirei Shalmona. We have a gift from Avraham Avinu that the Eibush is Elokeinu. So even though Hashem Elokeinu, which means we have a personal relationship with God, we have an intimate relationship with God, and in some way we can say we have zchusim, we have rights. We tell the Eibush that in doing tshuva, hine ki eine avodim al yad adeneim ki eine shivcha yad gevert. We're turning to the Eibush like a slave into a maidservant, who's reaching to their master, not with any schus, with any rights. It's the only place they have to turn. And the Yidden is doing tshuva, is reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even as Hashem is Havaya Lekeinu, Elakasha Lonu, Kicheinu V'cha Yaseinu, like it's brought from the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch. So the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe brings it also. The personal God of the Jewish people, a Yid is saying, nevertheless, Keineinenu, I'm reaching out to the Eibush like I never did in the Shivcha. Not because of my schustum, not because of my rights, not because of my Ben Avraham Mitzvah Yankiv, but like a slave. In other words, there's a brokenness. And that brokenness is not dalos, it's anius. It's not a poverty that has no shame. It's a poverty which has with it an extraordinary amount of dignity, an extraordinary amount of self-respect. And in that humility and in that shame and that dako, shval ruach, shechen ad morim v'kodesh, the Eibishter finds a place, like the expressions in Yiddish, stokin ganzer zach. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart, and in this case, the relationship the Eibush has with us, as we are aniyim, dalam v'reik, impoverished in the most favorable way. And we're reaching out to the Eibushter and asking Rachmanis that he should give us chanina. Now, chanina, of course, means that you give us stuff, right? Rakamim, a place to live, chaniyah. You should show us chavivus, Hashem he'emircha, and they should give us a matnas chinam. But the chanina here is the opportunity to reconnect to the Eibush that after the Avodas HaTshuva. Like ein lach davar eimid b'fnei HaTshuva. Right, it says in the Ramban, and it's brought in Likutei Torah. Ki ha-mitzvah zeis hashanechi mitzav chayim l'nifleisi mechova l'rechekehi li b'shamayim v'leiv ma'ayim v'yami ki korei v'lecha adav ha'mayed v'fircha v'vavcha la'seisei. So the Ramban explains that a mitzvah zeis is called the mitzvah HaTshuva. The 613 mitzvahs. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya explains the mitzvah zeis that it goes in all Taryag mitzvahs, like Rashi says, ha-teira shenitna l'cha b'ksav u'balpeh. And the Ramban says, no, a mitzvah zeis goes only in tshuva. There's a maimon in the Likutei Torah, that pasuk which follows that Ramban. Why? Because tshuva comes from anochi. Mitzvahs come from Havaya. Mitzvah comes from the Shtalshalus. In the Samachei, he brings three madrigas: mitzvah Hamelach, mitzvah Havaya, mitzvah Isai. But tshuva is a mitzvah which is above Seder Shtalshalus. Tshuva is a mitzvah which is so much above Seder Shtalshalus that there's a legitimate argument to be made that it's not b'minyan taryag, or at least only the vidya is b'minyan taryag and not the tshuva. And in the Likutei Sichos itself, you have status about whether the tshuva is a mitzvah or it's the mitzvah is lehisvade sema tshuva, but the tshuva itself is not a mitzvah. Ve'ein kan hamakom. Now I'm not time to go into the pilpul about whether tshuva counts as a mitzvah, doesn't count as a mitzvah. It's a different discussion. But one thing is for sure, tshuva is a mitzvah klolus also, even if it's a mitzvah pratis, because you can tshuva for any mitzvah. Each one of the 613 mitzvahs, if we did them whatever way, and it could have been better, we can return and do it better in mitzvah tshuva, which is connected to all mitzvahs. And that's why it's connected to the word anochi. The Eibush is above a name. Anochi the Shem Elokecha, above than Shem Havaya. And that's the idea that the chanina, the bracha of tshuva, that the Eibush re-embraces a yid no matter what. The Afapisha Chata Yisrael and Bonayim and Lachlifim Bo Macheres Seini Yochel, all the expressions that denote that the bond between Yidden and HaKadosh Baruch was a super rational bond. And when a Yid does tshuva, he's accessing and he's inspiring and he's revealing and he's manifesting. That bond is connected to the Madrega Manechi, which is higher than Seder Shtalshalus. In other words, not how the Eibush has a name, but Elecha Nasasi is saying, he's saying, even though El Havai Elokeinu, I could reach out to the Eibush because of my zchus. I'm comparing myself to the Eved and the Shivcha. I'm saying Keineinenu, but I'm not doing it as a dal with no shame. I'm doing it as an ani with maximum shame, and I'm beseeching the Eibush for chanina, for rachamim, and for a place to live, chanoya, and for a chavivus, and a matnas chinam of the Eibush re-embracing us in the process of tshuva and coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Return to the Eibush, Hashivenu Adeshem Elechav and Hashuva. Hashem comes close to us and we come close to Him. We come close to Him and He comes close to us. And there are three chaninas, right? Ache chanenu, adeshem chanenu. And I already mentioned to you before that it says in one of the Pirushim on the Medrash Sheikh Tev, which is very, very little on this Perek. There's a desperate little, tiny reference in this page. 4 little paragraphs that are all compiled and copied and pasted from other places. And that's written in the Mefarshim on the Perek. And the Yalkut Shemini has nothing in this Perek at all. So one of the ideas that's brought is that the 3 times Chanina corresponds to the Gemara that says Gimel Chines Heim. Chen Eretz al Yeshveha, Chen Isha al Bailach, Chen Mekach al Mikche. That the place you live you love, the woman you married you love, and the things you have purchased you also love. And the idea of the Chen is that I love them even though their value may be finite. The value of my home is limited, the value of my spouse is limited, and the value of my purchase is limited. But the Chen, the Chut Shel Chen Moshuch, gives it a property which is far, far deeper than its actual worth. And we're speaking to the Eibishter about Chanina not as tzaddikim, but as Baili Tshuva. That in the process of doing Tshuva, the Eibishter should have a Chen for us, both in terms of the fact that evil a meishav lay, right? For Satan said in the evil a meishav, the Eibishter wants a place to sit. Ki Yaakov b'chalayo, ki v'achan Hashem b'tziyin, which goes on Yechidish Nefesh. Evil a meishav lay, and therefore Yaakov b'chalayko. The Eibishter wants to have a dita b'tachtenim. Tziyin is not a metzias. Tziyin goes on etzem aneshama. So you can't have a meishav lay and tziyin that you have Yaakov b'chalayko. Yisrael is Luskul Asir in a second Madrig, but Yanke Bachalekah, the Eibishter wants a place. Chassidus brings it up from the Pasuk. Gam Tzipur Matzah Bayis, and the Eibishter cannot find himself a place. What's the evil Amesh of lay every Yid, and particularly the Leiv Nishba V'Nitzka, particularly the Baal Tshuva. And that's the first Chanina that the Eibishter is Chen, Mokim, Al Baila, that the Eibishter rests on the Jewish people, and the Jewish people in the Madriga Bali Tshuva. And he's resting on them, not because of their maila, but because of their brokenness. And that itself is done with a simcha. And this brokenness allows for the presence of Hashem to rest upon them in a way which is far beyond the Eibishter resting upon the Jewish people when they're worthy. And then of course you have the second Chen, the idea that we're the Eibishter's wife. Chen, Isha al Baila. And of course it means the same idea. Every Ish and Isha, every Baal and bias, Baal and Beisei, like the Gemara says, have a chen towards one another, meaning to say you're blind to the faults of the person you're closest to in the world. And that blindness is not just that you overlook it, but because there's a chen, there's a graciousness, there's an ephemeral, an intangible element which is the basis for this connection. And there's a chen ishal baila, that the Eibishter V'Yachad's relationship with the Jewish people is named from chen. And how is this an yin about Tshuva? So of course the answer to that question was already mentioned in previous classes, based on what it says in the Tzemach Tzedek, about this Kapital. That as long as the Yidden are the wife of the Eibishter, there is the inyan of Raf Savaynu Vuz, Rabba Sovel, and Avshenu Alaga, Sha'anan and Mabuz. Because the relationship is created, so it can be destroyed. The relationship is from the outside. If it's added, it can be undone. And like the Gemara says about Hoisa Kalmona, Isha Shalach Baila Medina Sayam. Almona is called Almona Chaya, right? A man is married to his wife, and he goes away, doesn't come back, and he doesn't know if she's alive. She doesn't know if he's alive or dead, so she's an aguna. So she's called an Almona Chaya. She's called a widow, but she's called a living widow. She can't marry somebody else because she's still connected to that person. And that's what Golos represents. Hoisa Kalmona, the relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter is such that the Jewish people Kvayachal are estranged from the Eibishter. Isha Jeholach Baila Lemedina Sayom. And the Isha has no idea whether Baila is even alive, and where he is, and what's going to be the hemshech of their relationship, v'chuli, v'chuli, v'chuli. And that's why there's so much busha. But there's a story from the Rebbe which I love. I've told it a number of times. I love this story. That when the Rebbe was in Nice, there was a shtikli yeshiva there. And one of the people in that yeshiva was Zalman Shechter, who told over the story in a recording that the Rebbe found out that there's a yeshiva. They'd meet at night and they would learn. And I think it was a Tu B'Shvat, Chamisha B'Shvat, or a Lag B'Emer. I think it was Chamisha B'Shvat, that they decided to supplant their learning with a shtikl Fabreng. It was a Chassidish group. I'm not sure if he was before the war connected to Chassidus. He was certainly intelligent. And they decided to Fabreng, and they sat on to Fabreng. A strange young man walked in. It was the Rebbe, didn't know who he was. And the Rebbe came and sat down, and he started to ask them what's going on and what they're doing. And they were learning Masechta Kedushin. No, they were learning Masechta Ksubas. Or they were quoted the first Mishnah Masechta Ksubas, Besula Nisas Liyem Arvi. And in Almona, he says, a Be'ula is Liyem HaChamishi. Psul, Nisas Yem Arvi, because of Tainas Psulim. And Almona, because Misamech, Yem Shleisha Yamim, Yem HaChamishi, Yem Mishish, and Yem Shabbos Kedesh. Like the Gemara says. So the Rebbe explained, Besula Nisas Liyem Arvi, that the first relationship between Yidden had and the Eibishter is as a Besula. And that Yom Revi means Elef HaRevi, the 4th millennia, between the year 3000 and the year 4000. That when Yidden were the Rego of a Besula, they were perfect, they were pure. So the Eibishter developed a relationship, established a relationship with the Jewish people in that millennium. But then there was a Churban and there was a Golus. And it's Hoyse Kalmona Ki'isha Shehallach Ba'ila L'Medina Sayyom. And Almona is B'yem HaChamishi. Now, of course, the way you would explain it in Lumdus is that you discovered that your husband never died. He's still alive, but you were an Almona Chaya, and when you come back to your husband, that's like the end of an Almona, which is the Elef HaChamishi. Thursday, which is the year 4001, and the year 5000, which is what could have been had Mashiach come in the 5th millennium, But then you have Friday, the 6th millennium, and the Rebbe brought the idea of Machzeh Gerushasei. That a Machzeh Gerushasei, in other words, if she's a woman who was once married, so when you marry her and she's not a Besula, you don't have to have 7 days of Simcha, it's enough 3 days of Simcha. But if you're remarrying your own wife, you have to have only 1 day of Simcha, so you get married on Friday. In other words, you can't get married on Shabbos, but you get married on Friday. So the Rebbe said the idea of Yom HaShishi, of the 6th millennium, is the union of Gerusha. Like Vayachal Deibish's Machzeh Gerushasei is taking back his divorce sea. So when the Rebbe said this vart, and he got to the punchline that we're holding now in the Elef HaShishi, in the 6th millennia, and the Eibishter Vayachal is bringing us back after what appears to be an estrangement, a distancing of self, not just Kalmona Chaya, but even Chas v'Shalom, even worse. So that happens on Yom HaShishi. So when the Rebbe said that part of the Pisk, of the Maimon Chazal, of the Pshetel, of the Pshat, he started to cry. And Kedake B'Kodesh, when the Rebbe cried, he would start to cough to cover up the Bechiyah. You shouldn't see that he's emotional, he's upset. And that's the Pshat. Cheni Shal Baila. In this case, talking about the Baila is the Eibishter. And Cheni is Klal Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael. And Knesset Yisrael, the Madrega of Bali Tshuva. And the Bal Tshuva has big milas. Bal Tshuva has Meidendika milas. And the whole mile of Bal Tshuva is because from the distance. Halavai b'chedish chazisich, b'kedish chazisich. Bal Tshuva is coming merochek. With all the miles of the Bali Tshuva, as we discussed in the earlier classes. But there's a special chen isha al baila. There's a special grace that the husband, the Eibishter, feels to his wife if it's a Machzeh Gerushasei. And that's how you understand the second chen in this Kapital, if you're studying this Kapital as a Kapital which is connected to Bali Tshuva. The Eibishter shows a special grace, a special love, a special appreciation for Yidden and the Madrega of Bali Tshuva, like a husband to a wife. And finally, chen mekach al mikche, lekeach al mikche. This is a special chen. The Eibishter purchased us. The Eibishter made us his. And of course, there's many aspects to the idea the Eibishter made us his, beginning with the fact that he took us out of Mitzrayim and he made the 10 Makkos and he saved the firstborn. Over and over and over again, the Eibishter did things for the Jewish people. Avodahem le'avodim la'avodim. The Eibishter made us his. And as we are his, we have obviously an obligation to him. But as we are his, he has the blindness, he has the bias, he has the lack of objectivity of any person who's purchased anything. That when you buy something, even if it was a bad purchase, you have a tendency towards finding favor in the purchase that you made, because you made it whether it was a good purchase or a bad purpose. And Chamisha Kinyanim Kana Kadosh Baruch Hu Be'elami in Yisrael Kinyan Echad. One of those Kinyanim is Yisrael, and there is that Kinyan as Yidden Tzadikim. There is that Kinyan as Yidden are in Golus for the purposes of Yidden Tzedek Aliyah alone, and there is that Kinyan as Yidden are in Golus because of the Inim Epnei Chateinu and the Malas HaTshuva, and the Kinyan of the Eibishter re-embracing the Jewish people after they do Tshuva. And again, like I said in Rambam, in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Zayin, where the Rambam explains at great length the special kind of favoritism that the Eibishter has to a Yid who's in the Madrega of Baal Tshuva. in all three of these aspects. Chein mokam al yeshvecha, safe kol safe. The Yid is the seat for Yachad, the Merkava for the Eibush to rest in this world. Chein isha al bailo, not isha al bailo dinus yam, but machzig rishasei. And the Chein mekach al mekhay, the Eibush sort of pushed us away, and now he's sort of reacquiring us. And of course, the reason for the tshuva, and the reason for the Chein, and the three ideas of Chein that we're talking about, and for the Eibush re-embracing us on a madrege of Elecha, of the Eibush is embracing us, not like Avaya Lekenu, where we have a relationship based on earning, based on some kind of ishtalshalos, but Keini Avodim Yad Adonai Kein Shivcha Yad Gevirto. And the source of it is the shame, this 3 times shame. Rav Savanu Vuz, Rav Savalan Hashem Laga Sha'ananim, Habuz Legeyenim. No, I did not see in the Mefarshim that explained the 3 ideas of shame, right? The 3 ideas of Chein. So I mentioned 2 concepts. First of all, the 4 definitions of the word Leisachanim and Teda. And second of all, the Gemara that says Shloisha Chines Heim. But how you have 3 different kinds of boys, 3 different kinds of shame, I don't know. And one of the ways of explaining it b'derech hefsher is that the 3 concepts of shame is the shame of an Aveda. That's the first shame. Chanenu Hashem Chanenu Kirav Savanu Vuz, the shame of an Aveda. And the second shame is the shame of not having shame from an Aveda, which is a much more acute shame. And that's the Rabbi Savalan Sheno Laga Sha'ananim. If you look in the Mefarshim, there's different interpretations of Laga Sha'ananim, and one of them is that Sha'ananim goes on Yidden. And Laga Sha'ananim is the shame, is the embarrassment that the Jewish people bring to themselves if Shechata V'lo Yaseh Teshuva. He has no shame. And then, of course, the third shame is the shame of being re-embraced by the Eibush, the humility of, in spite of the fact that we did whatever it was that we did, that the Eibush re-embraces us, and that's the Habuz Legei Yenim. And of course, you could translate Yenim goes on Yidden also, like you have the Chassidus by Rabbi Yossi. The Pinteliyah, the Madrega of Chaya, high Madregas of the Neshama, and there is the shame, there's the humility of being re-embraced and re-included in Michitas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is completely made up. It doesn't have any source. That there's the shame of doing an Aveda, for which you do tshuva, and the shame itself motivates the tshuva. Then there is the shame of becoming chazar v'shana nasa like a heter. You do an Aveda over and over again, you have no more shame, you have no more busha. And then there's the busha of the Eibishter embracing us and forgiving us and re-including us in his sphere. And that's the pshat in this pasuk Shir Amalas. It's a song. It's the song. It's the Simcha Achar Otzev. It's the song of the Bali Tshuva, of the Baal Tshuva, which is us Elechanas Asiyas Eine, that he is reaching out to Atzmas Masein Tzal Baruch. And believe that I will do one more class, and that class is going to be on the Rebbe, really more than anything else, where the Rebbe interprets the Kapital Elechanas Asiyas Eine Hayeshi Bashamayim Hine Chene Avadam Yad Adineim. The idea of the lay Golos, that a Yid can't be in Golos 1 more minute than he's already in Golos. Golos is Hepech the Teva, it's Hepech the whole Metzias of a Yid, v'chuli v'chuli. U'b'loshan Rav Yadu, Kafishi is by Lakam and Mirza Hashem.